Since we're talking about great women of the Bible this week, we would be remiss not to mention Ruth. The story of Ruth plays out like a beautiful Hollywood drama. There's tragedy and sadness, a wonderful love story, twists and turns, and of course, a very happy ending. Take time to read this wonderful book of Ruth. There's only 4 chapters. It will take you 10 or 15 minutes. Read it for all the special details. But today I'll give you the summary story. Well, there was an Israelite woman named Naomi who lived in the time of the Judges, a time in the Old Testament when everyone did whatever they wanted sinfully. I like to say it's kind of like living in America today. Well, there was a famine at this time, and Naomi had to move to Moab. But tragedy followed Naomi. Her husband died, and both of her sons died. All she was left with were her 2 daughters-in-law, Orpah and Ruth. Well, Naomi told them, stay here, stay in Moab, move on with your life, remarry. But that's when we meet the virtue and character of Ruth. Ruth made this wonderful plea to stay with her mother-in-law. Talk about love. Devoted to her people, and best of all, devoted to the true God that she came to know. So Ruth and Naomi moved back to Israel. And there she showed her devoted love every day again, gleaning and gathering grain in the fields. And one day, Ruth met the owner of that field, a dashing, godly man by the name of Boaz. And following her mother-in-law's advice, Naomi told Ruth to make a modest, loving, humble approach to Boaz. And sure enough, Boaz showed love in return to Ruth and did everything he could in a good and godly way to marry Ruth. And they lived happily ever after. The amazing thing about this story is that Ruth was an unbeliever, a Moabite, who came into God's family of believers, and when she married Boaz, would become the great-grandmother of King David, and like Rahab yesterday, an ancestress of our Savior Jesus. Ruth shows us what it means to be a great woman of faith. She was humble and modest and devoted and loyal and faithful and loving. Thank God for great women of faith like Ruth.